So y'all keep getting me. Joey, I'm gonna need this playlist. Okay, we've been waiting. We have been waiting for this session. I can't even believe that Shanti Das spoke about financial literacy as a complement in the spirit of mental health and how you can keep yourself whole, heart, body, and mind. So the idea that she shouted out financial literacy, not even knowing that that was on deck, to me is a sign that we are moving in the right direction. How can we all prepare for a better financial future together with education-based banking? Very interesting. Well, I know that there is no right age to start saving and or investing. We all learned very valuable lessons coming out of COVID and the despair we could see and feel in our communities. If you were with us last year, you know we had Bola come and give us great advice about how to save, some strategies for successfully navigating student loans, scholarships, and the process for staying above board. This year, we chose to focus on a different angle related to financial literacy. And the truth is, I don't really think y'all are ready for Tanya. The Shark Tank certainly wasn't. They didn't want that smoke. She is a ball of energy and she stays on the go. A little tidbit, she and I are mommies together in Jack and Jill, Brooklyn chapter. And I'm just saying, she's also my neighbor, like legit. She's like 6 houses down from me. So the truth is, I don't know when Tanya sleeps or eats. She's got a gang of kids. She has a fabulous husband. I don't know when she carves out time for herself, talk about mental health. But to me, she's simply one of the hardest working women in this business. Without further ado, please welcome my friend and soon to be your big sister, Tanya Van Court. Rock out, T.
Thank you so much, Nikki. I am just going to share my screen because I want a little bit of help from this presentation to deliver the message that I know Nikki has so beautifully teed up today. Are you seeing my screen? Okay. Well, let me do a brief introduction of myself. Nikki has given me a beautiful introduction, but I want to provide you some more information about myself. So I will just say, hola, me llamo Tanya y hoy vamos a hablar sobre el mundo de instrumentos financieros, incluyendo los IRAs y tarjetas de créditos y más cosas. I'm sure that there are many of you out there who are trying to think about your Spanish lessons from elementary school or high school and saying, wait a minute, I don't understand what she just said. And I hope she's not going to give this entire presentation in Spanish because I never quite learned how to be fluent in Spanish. And that just wouldn't be fair or right. And guess what? You're right. That wouldn't be fair or right for me to give you a whole presentation with important information in a language that you were never taught or didn't understand. But guess what? That's what America's doing to you every single day. But America's not doing it in the language of Spanish or French or Italian. America is doing it in the language of money, which I would argue is just as important for you to understand as English if you want to be financially successful in this country. And the language of money includes terms like 401k, 529, stocks, bonds, compound interest, asset allocation, diversification, stock market, FICO score, APR, and APY. And you may say, wow, Tanya, that's a lot of terms. Do I really need to know them all? And the answer, ladies, is yes, you really need to know them all because every one of these terms is critical in terms of your ability to build wealth. And so we're going to talk about these terms today, but we're not going to talk about them in boring terms. We know that language matters. And so we are going to teach you language in ways that resonate with you and ways that resonate with me. And the first place that we're going to start is we're going to start with stories. And I'll start with my own story, which is I grew up in Oakland, California, which is very similar in my mind to Brooklyn, New York, where I am now, 6 houses down from Nikki. But when I grew up in Oakland, my mom was an elementary school teacher and she was brilliant. She had a master's degree in education. She was very well regarded in the district. And my mom taught me everything I knew. She taught me so much that I never even went to kindergarten. I skipped kindergarten. And then I went on to go to Stanford and get 2 degrees in engineering. That's how great she was. But guess what my mother didn't teach me about? She didn't teach me about money because she didn't know anything about money. And so our first lesson today is just because you don't know about money doesn't mean you're not brilliant. It means no one ever taught you. And so, because my mother never taught me anything about money, guess what? I grew up not knowing. And even with those 2 degrees in engineering from Stanford, when I was in my late 20s, I worked at a company in Silicon Valley, and that company gave me a bunch of stock as part of my compensation. And I didn't know what to do with it. So I treated it kind of like the gym benefit, where I just tucked it to the side and said, I'll get to that. And that was the wrong thing to do with it. You see, I watched that stock and it continued to go up. And I thought, oh, wow, okay, I did a good job. But just because it was going up in the moment didn't mean I was doing a good job with being a steward of that stock. And so one day in 2001, the stock market completely took a tank. And it wasn't the overall stock market. It was the technology sector of the stock market in particular, the NASDAQ. And when the stock market tanked, my $1 million in stock and stock options plummeted to a few thousand in a few hours. And I thought to myself, wow, Tanya, that was really stupid, but you can't turn back the hands of time. All you can do is make sure that that never happens to your own kids or other kids who are like your kids. And so while I know that you all are not kids, that you are well beyond that, part of my commitment to you is that you never make those same mistakes, because you've learned and you've been taught. And so today we are going to talk about building wealth. We're going to talk about it not only through my story, but through the story of somebody you all may know a little bit better than me, Jay-Z. And we are talking about building wealth, a blueprint inspired by Jay-Z. And yes, I use the term blueprint intentionally because Jay-Z released an album called Blueprint, but he has also given us the blueprint for how to become a billionaire. And the blueprint for how to become a billionaire is one that every one of us can follow, and every one of us can absolutely be millionaires and billionaires, every one of you, by just following the blueprint. So the first part of the blueprint is what you've already done. It is, you have to have skills in order to make money. Jay-Z had rapping skills, and those skills enabled him to make money. But after he made that money, the most important thing that he could do was save the money and not spend it all. And so when we talk about saving, we can just invoke a lyric from Jay-Z, which is, I bought every V12 engine, wish I could take it back to the beginning. What does Jay mean by that quote? He means that even as a billionaire, he looks back on his life and says, I wasted my money. And if I ask all of you, how many of you have maybe one too many pairs of sneakers or cute shoes or bags or sweaters? You all may raise your hand and say, maybe one too many. And guess what? Today's the day that I want that to change for you. And I want that to change for you because the more you become consumers, the less you become savers and investors. America has built its billions of dollars and trillions of dollars in economic infrastructure on the backs of Black folks who have been the consumers who have made everyone else rich. And so as we have made everyone else rich, we have gotten poor as a community and as communities of people. And so I want you to make sure that you are thinking about your life and your trajectory as one of becoming a saver, an investor, and an owner, and not just a consumer. So Jay-Z said, I bought every V12 engine, wish I could take it back to the beginning, meaning I wasted my money and I wish I could redo that. So what's the definition of saving? I think we all know that if you look at Webster's, they will give us some fancy definition like an economy of or reduction in money, time, or other official resources, or the money one has saved, especially through a bank or official scheme. But the bottom line is saving is just not spending. Or as my grandmother used to tell me, Tanya, don't let the money burn a hole in your pocket. And we have to get into the practice of not spending things that we don't need to spend money on. I used to tell my grandmother, well, listen, grandmommy, I'm going to be so rich that I can spend as much money as I want. And that's the first mistake that I want you all to avoid, because all three of these men made that mistake. They thought they could spend as much money as they wanted. And I'm here to tell you now that no matter how much you make as you graduate from college and get your first amazing, extraordinary job, and that job has more zeros than you have ever seen in your life, you can't spend it all. Because if you spend frivolously, you will end up bankrupt, just like these three people. Johnny Depp spent tens of thousands of dollars on wine and lived a lavish lifestyle and ended up $10 million in debt. MC Hammer had not one but 2 helicopters and ended up $13 million in debt. And Mike Tyson thought that a cat or a dog weren't good enough and ended up buying Siberian tigers. And while you may say, these are ridiculous, Tanya, I would never do any of these things, the truth of the matter is we do the equivalent of these things. When we buy 10 pairs of sneakers or 10 pairs of shoes or 10 fancy bags, we do the equivalent of these things. And so the first rule is, let's become savers and think about ourselves as savers and not consumers, because being a consumer, you're following somebody else's path to poverty. Being a saver, you're following somebody else's path to success. All saving is good saving, but some saving is great saving. And so one of the things I want you to pay attention to as soon as you get out into the real world, and even now, is interest rates. So why are interest rates so important? Well, look, interest rates dictate how much money you make on a transaction or how much money you lose. You know, my daughter, Gabrielle, often comes to me and says, hey, mommy, I want to borrow $100. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. But, you know, if you borrow $100, I'm going to charge you 10% interest weekly. And she's like, oh, no, not interest. And I'm like, oh, yes, interest. And so if she borrows $100 after that first week, she owes me what? 10% of $100 or 110. But after the second week, she owes me 10%, not of the first 100, but of the whole 110. So she owes me 121 because now she owes me the 10% of 110 or $11. So 121. And then in the third week, she owes me 10% more of the whole 121. So that's 10% of 12 more dollars. And so she owes me 133. And this is the concept of compound interest. It keeps growing and growing and growing and building on what you already owe. And so if you are the borrower like Gabrielle, my daughter, this compound interest concept is bad for you. It is making her broke week over week over week. And that's the same thing your credit cards will do. If you are the lender like me, where you are putting your money into a bank or putting your money into another financial instrument that is giving you interest, then this concept of interest is really good for you because it is making you wealthy week over week over week. But what you have to know is interest rates really matter, and pay attention to them when you are trying to grow your money or when you are borrowing money. So let's use an example. My friend Nikki says she's going to put her money in a savings account, and she's fabulous. So she has $100,000 sitting around in her bag in her house, y'all. And so the $100,000, she's like, this is not smart. I'm going to go put it in a savings account and get 2% interest. Now, mind you, this is only an example because today you could only get about 0.2% from a savings account, but this example is important. So please just hear me out. And so she puts her money in a savings account, and after a year, she has $102,000. And after 5 years, she has $110,000. And after 10 years, she has $121,000. And she did not even get off of her couch, y'all. And so Nikki does that, and she's feeling great about herself. And we have another friend who's in Jack and Jill with us, and her name is Crystal. And Crystal is like, well, if Nikki can do that with 2%, I hear that I can walk 2 miles down and put my money into a bond for 2.5%. And Nikki's like, oh, I don't know if it's worth that 2-mile walk, Crystal. Well, let's find out whether or not Crystal should make that walk. After a year of putting her money into a bond, which is, by the way, just another financial vehicle at a bank. It's a fancy word, but it doesn't mean much other than they put your money into something that will guarantee you a higher interest rate, but you have to keep your money in a little longer. So after a year, Crystal has $102,520. After 5 years, Crystal has $113,000. And after 10 years, Crystal has $128,000. All from that little 0.5%. Crystal made $7,000 more than Nikki. And Mandisa comes along, and Mandisa's like, hey, I'm going to put my money into a certificate of deposit, a CD. Again, they'll hold my money a little bit longer, but they'll give me a higher interest rate on my $100,000. And with that CD, after 10 years, Mandisa has $132,000 compared to Nikki's $121,000. So listen, do interest rates matter? Absolutely. When you are going to put your money into something to grow your money, you make sure it's at the highest interest rate possible. And if you are borrowing money, like when you swipe that credit card, you better make sure you have the lowest interest rate you can get. Credit cards are like a sometimey friend. We think we like them, but once we run up that debt on credit cards, they are like a friend that you really want to get rid of, but they won't go away. And so, you have to imagine that you have this credit card and you want to go on a trip and your friends have the cash, but you don't have the cash because you haven't gotten your first paycheck from your first real job yet. So you're like, I will just put it on my credit card. So you put $2,000 on for the trip. Your credit card interest rate is 18%. And yes, that is a real credit card interest rate. It sounds high compared to what I just told you you can make by putting your money in the bank, right? And that's because it is high. This is how America makes money and makes you poor. So the credit card interest rate is 18%, but the credit card is like, we love you. We are only going to make you pay a minimum payment of $10. Well, guess what? You pay that minimum payment in January and in February and in March, and you're like, this bill doesn't seem to be going down. In fact, it seems to be creeping up a little bit in spite of the fact I'm making this minimum payment. Well, that's because that bill is growing because of that 18% interest rate, and it's going to keep growing. In fact, it grows so much that you make 370 payments or 30 years of payments before you have paid off that credit card. And the total amount you paid was $6,951. So if you want to know what to do with your credit cards, this is not what you do. What you do is you pay them off at the end of every month on time, in full. You only charge your groceries and your light bill on your credit card. So you make sure that you have the money to pay those off. And when you do that, you are signaling to every financial institution in the country that you're a great credit risk and they can loan you money and should loan you money because you pay it off on time. And when you do that, you will have a high credit score. And a high credit score is like a gift from up above, because when you have a high credit score, you can borrow money for your first house at a really low interest rate. You can borrow money to start your first business at a really low interest rate. And people trust you to pay back that money on time because of what you've demonstrated with your credit card. So you don't use your credit card for the things that you want. You use your credit card for the things that you need. So that was chapter 1 of our blueprint. Chapter 2 of our blueprint is investing. Because there's something that you have to know, which is saving will never make you wealthy. If you don't hear anything else that I say today, I need you to hear this. Saving will never, ever make you wealthy. The only path to wealth is through investing. What does Jay-Z say? Jay-Z says, I bought some artwork for $1 million. 2 years later, it's worth $2 million. I can't wait to give it to my children. Let me tell you what Jay-Z didn't do. He didn't walk into the art store and say, ooh, that painting is dope. How much is it? $1 million? I'll take it. What he did was, oh, that painting is dope. How much is it? $1 million? Who else owns pieces by this artist? How much have they increased in value in the past 5 years? How much will they increase in value in the next 5 years? If he had done the first thing, he would have just been spending his money. But because he did the second thing, he was investing his money with the expectation to get a return or a profit on that money. So what does investing mean? It is using money to achieve a profit, and you can do that by putting it into lots of different things. You can invest in real estate. When I bought my house in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, it cost $550,000, and now it's worth over $2 million. You can invest in fine art or artwork like Jay-Z. You can invest in the stock market, and all that means is you can either go and buy individual stocks like, hey, I think Tesla's going to go up. I'm going to buy some of that. Or you can buy a basket of stocks that is a representation of the stock market, and that's called a mutual fund or an ETF. And when you buy that basket of stocks, guess what happens? When the stock market goes up, that basket of stocks will likely mirror the stock market. So you don't have to be a genius investor that knows whether Tesla's going up or Nike's going up or Amazon's going up. You just put your money in that basket and your money will do what the stock market does. You could also invest in startup companies like mine. I've established a company that is a fintech app like Venmo and Cash App, but for kids and families, and it's called Goalsetter. And so those are all of the things that you can invest in. This is a blow your mind moment. So let me tell you, are saving and investing basically the same thing? Well, we talked about my friend Nikki wanting to save. So Nikki now takes her $100,000 and she says, I'm going to put it into a savings account at a 1% return, and I'm going to keep it there for 30 years and never, ever, ever touch it because I know that saving is important. On the other hand, Mandisa comes along again and says, well, that's great, but we just talked about investing too. And for the past 50 years, the stock market has increased at a rate of about 7% every year. And it's projected to do the same thing for the next 50 years. Now, some years it goes up by 13%. Some years it goes down by 1%. But if you leave your money in the stock market over a long period of time, you can project that you will get the average return of 7% per year. So what does our friend Nikki have at the end of 30 years? A whopping $106,000. I wish I could see Nikki's face right now because I know how disappointed it will look. And I just love to see her animated expressions. But that's okay. Nikki is always happy for her friends. And so she turns to Mandisa and she says, well, Mandisa, you put your $100,000 in the stock market. How much do you have? And Mandisa has $761,000 in the stock market after a 30-year investment. So, are saving and investing the same thing? Absolutely not. This is my proof that you cannot save your way to wealth. The minute you get your first job, your job is to save 3 to 6 months of an emergency fund. That means 3 to 6 months of your expenses, your rent, your car note, your car insurance, your food. Put that away. Put that in the savings account because that should be secure and not go up and down. But the minute you're done doing that, every dime you earn should be invested in real estate, in the stock market, in something that will grow and grow your wealth. This is a double blow your mind moment. Which investment plan will make more money? Well, I'm going to, say we have 2 women in the audience, and I'm just going to say Keisha. Keisha says, I'm going to start investing $5,000 a year the minute I get out of college, just like Miss Tanya said, and I'm going to do that for 10 years. So she invests $50,000, starting with $5,000 the day she gets out of college. Andrea says, you know what? I want to do that, but I kind of want to chill a little bit. I want to get a car. I want to live in a nice apartment. So I'm going to start investing in year 6, but I'm going to invest $10,000 a year for 5 years. So I will double up and I'm going to catch up with Keisha. Let's see who is going to have the most money, Keisha or Andrea. Well, Keisha, after 5 years of investing $50,000, will have almost $79,000. After 10 years of investing $50,000, because she invested every year for 10 years. After only 5 years of investing that $50,000, the last 5 years, what's Andrea going to have? She's going to have $71,000, even though she doubled up and tightened her belt for that last 5 years. What does this mean? That compound interest that I talked to you about was working on Keisha's account. The earlier you invest, the better. That is how you make yourself wealthy, by putting away and investing whatever you can from day one. When I say Nike, what do you think of? You probably think of sneakers, but the next time I say it, I really want you to say, oh no, Miss Tanya, I think of the Nike corporate headquarters and that Nike stock ticker symbol. Why? Because back in 1980, you could have spent $35 on a pair of Nike sneakers, or you could have spent that $35 buying Nike stock. If you spent $35 measly on Nike stock instead of Nike sneakers, what would you have today? Well, you would have today $1.82 million if you bought that Nike stock. So the next time you think about buying a pair of Nike sneakers, I want you to instead buy a share of Nike stock. We can either grow poor by being the consumers, or we can grow rich by becoming the investors. And by the way, you don't have to be, again, an investment guru to make money. If you look at all these stocks, and let's say you had $1,000 and you didn't know which to invest in, and you invested across all of them, you would have made, in a 10-year period, 5 times your money with McDonald's, 6 times your money with Disney, 10 times your money with Microsoft, 10 times your money with Under Armour, 60 times your money with Netflix, 2 times your money with The Gap, 20 times your money with Amazon, 2 times your money with Macy's, 7 times your money with Foot Locker, and more than 2 times your money with Ford. So would you have been happy with a mutual fund of all of these stocks, which is called a diversified portfolio, because you got a little bit of everything, a little bit of technology, a little bit of real estate, a little bit of retail, a little bit of everything in here? Would you be happy with those returns across the board? Of course you would. This would make you wealthy. And guess what? You wouldn't have the risk associated with, if one company or one industry like technology or beauty falls, you're losing all of your money. Here, diversification is important because you gain money without the risk. And so that's the other thing I want you to do. Can you be a millionaire? Listen, ladies, it only takes $30 a day. If you invest $30 from the time that you get out of college, over 30 years, you will have invested a total of $324,000, and you would have earned $728,000 in interest. And so if you can carve out $30 a day, not to go out to lunch and go out to dinner, but invest it in a mutual fund, this is what you can earn over the next 30 years, and all of you can be millionaires. And I'm convinced you will make much more than this, because you will have diversified investments outside of this. You will own property, you will invest in startup companies, etc. Jay-Z officially made it to billionaire status. This is my last slide. What percentage of his money came from rapping? Is it 5%, 20%, 50%, or 75%? Well, let me tell you, it was only 20%. And what does that mean? It means that you don't need to be a rapper to be a billionaire. All you need to do is follow this blueprint of, you have skills, you will use those skills to make money. Once you make that money, you're not going to spend all of your money and be a consumer. You're going to save that money and save enough for an emergency fund, and then save beyond that so you can begin investing. When you invest that money, you will grow wealth, and that will be your path to wealth. And then beyond investing, you will start owning things. You will own homes. You can own franchises in your neighborhood. You can own your own technology company like I do with Goalsetter. And so that is our path to how we're going to build wealth. Diversification is key. Jay-Z started Rockaware, invested in technology companies like Uber, bought Tidal, a Scandinavian streaming service, has an art collection, and has real estate. And that is not just for the rich, and is not just for the stars. This is for all of us. Let's all celebrate this as the first step to our knowledge train for building our own wealth. Thank you all for having me today. I really enjoyed being here, and I hope you got something out of it.
Thank you, Miss Tanya Van Court. I love that talk. I love that financial wealth talk, okay? The earlier you can learn about financial literacy, the better off you'll be in life. You know, so if you can refinance your student loans, do that. As soon as you get your paycheck, pay yourself first, okay? 40%, 20%, just anything, okay? And make sure you're not spending frivolously unless it's on me.